Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. What was the fire me I don't even care moment you had at work, part 6. I worked as a summer intern at a biotech startup during my first 2 summers at college. The 4 of us worked mostly in my boss's lab, which was an assembly lab. He was also the only one in charge of supervising the summer interns. He occasionally sent 1 or 2 of us to assist other managers with their projects during the weeks when we didn't have any major assignments, should they require the additional manpower. The same guy who was my boss, the second summer I worked there, left a week into my internship. Since I was the only returning intern and had the most lab experience out of the 4 of us, they decided to basically give me his job for the summer instead of hiring someone new or moving someone into his position. They gave me a cubicle and a small raise. After a week or 2, I was getting a little tired of the job and realized that all they really wanted from me was to watch the other interns. And by watch, I really mean watch them, not just make sure they didn't screw up. Nearly all of the work that our specific lab was in charge of was transferred to another manager and their group. The 4 of us had literally no more than 2 hours of work to complete each day. Even though it was a college internship, we were paid as full-time employees, not hourly, so I put the other 3 interns on a rotating schedule and essentially told them I only needed 1 to come in a day. I used to spend almost all of my work days playing Euro games against Germans at my cubicle where I'd installed Brettspielwelt. During lunch, I'd take whatever intern happened to be working that day golfing, and after our 3-hour break, I would literally walk back into the office with my clubs. We would stroll to the rooftop and enjoy the sun. I fully engaged with Office Space. They never spoke to me at all. Since hiring a new PhD to oversee the lab would have cost far more money, they blatantly disregarded the fact that they had 4 salaried staff members doing little more than maintaining one of their labs. It goes without saying that I didn't return the following year. In order to obtain a permit and obtain the necessary wind-storm ratings, my dad's massive deck project for a restaurant required a lot of architectural drawings. As a student of engineering, I consented to complete the drawings. However, a licensed engineer's stamp was still needed. To give them an idea of how he wanted the project to look, I created a first draft of the drawings. After we gave them our initial drawings, they promised to redo them in 2 weeks. But in order to start the project and finish it in time for the restaurant to open on schedule, we needed the drawings stamped within a week. In the end, I was asked to volunteer to keep editing the drawings in light of the changes the engineers would send us on. At this point, I had put in close to 40 to 50 hours working on the drawings, and the engineers were being jerky and not answering our questions about what specifications we needed, which was causing us to be late for our permit. During our final revision at 9 p.m., we received the final list of changes that needed to be made. My dad advised me to stay up late the night before to finish the drawings in time for the following morning. Since my dad wouldn't officially hire me, I was working 50+ hours a week at another job and would come home exhausted. Considering that this was purely voluntary work, I told him that unless he wanted to pay me, he could get the engineers to do the drawings and I'd be deleting my files. After telling him I was done with the project, I finished the files in about an hour and went to bed. I didn't speak to him after that. When I woke up the following morning, he was begging me to finish the project and handing me an envelope containing money. The project began late despite the day the permit was obtained. It ultimately took us an additional month to complete our portion of the restaurant, and it didn't open for business for 3 months after we were done. My current job, I was given the task of assisting with the Cisco ISC implementation of Network Access Control (NAC) on our wired network. The lead engineer put in about 90 hours a week at work. He was a great friend, but lonely and single. I would constantly bring it up to him, telling him that it was extremely unhealthy for him in addition to it being bad for the rest of us. He would always reply, "It's all I have," which hurt to hear, but I couldn't hang out with him after work because he lives in a different city. After a year, we are fully immersed in the project. I'm unable to keep his hours, so I'm rapidly getting behind schedule. The fact that he is handling the majority of the work is something my boss frequently brings up as a drawback for me. At last, I lost my cool. "You can forget it if you want me to work 90 hours a week like, let's call him Bill," I said. "I won't ruin my life and my family in order to please you. If this is not the engineer you're looking for, please feel free to let me go." I didn't talk to my boss for roughly 2 weeks. I was interviewing and setting up too, figuring he was stacking the deck to get rid of me. Instead, he calls a meeting and asks if I'm interested in becoming the wireless architect, typical in my line of work. Our business requires full-time attention due to its extensive wireless footprint. They gave Bill 3 more engineers to add to the NAC project after I left. Here, it's what I refer to as a win-win. I worked as an engineer at a new web company. A lot of new executives were hired. They then messed things up, at least from our point of view. Most of us could see after a few months that something was wrong and the company was going out of business. People in the ranks were complaining and groaning and asking management a lot of questions to try to figure out what was going on. The new CEO, who was a jerk, finally called a meeting of the whole staff. During his speech at the meeting, he said things like, "This place is gonna make us all rich, and it's a great place to work. We just need to work together. I don't know why the engineers feel unhappy and powerless," he said next. "I want you to know that I see all of you as family, and that each of you is important to the company and to me." When I raised my hand, he took a break and asked if I had a question. I looked him straight in the eye and asked, "What's your name?" The room was quiet for what seemed like a long time, but was probably only 5 seconds. His words were hard to understand, and the meeting ended soon after. It's funny, but I can't remember his exact answer now that I'm telling this story. So I left immediately, and several people followed me. Approximately 1 month after that meeting, the company ultimately went out of business. What is your narrative about the HOA or Neighbors from H, Part 6? As a background, I used to serve on the board of this homeowners association many years ago, but I was forced out by the president. I didn't care so much about it because I was moving anyway, but I did keep it as a rental property. Currently, I have a renter there who was a former president of the homeowners association. As the president continued to place letters in the mailbox, my renter complained, as he should have, given that he's fully aware of the laws that govern this situation. Consequently, I wrote a letter to the president demanding that he put an end to these actions. Suddenly, the following month, I receive a letter that contains 5 violations. But there's no real explanation of what's going on, nor is there any text that explains how to make things right. The builder has made some architectural decisions 20 years ago which resulted in some legal violations. I'm going to the attorneys. I don't have much to say about this because it went pretty smoothly. I sent the letters to the attorney and they drafted a demand letter with words that sounded very frightening. In the letter, they demanded that the violations should be removed, and they claimed that the attorney's fees should be paid. I received a notification from the management company last night informing me that all violations have been discharged. Given that I'm currently located in Puerto Rico, I believe that it would be appropriate for me to have another piña colada. Don't worry, I'm not a big drinker. A piece of advice for anyone who's dealing with shady HOAs: you should always document everything. My personal experience has taught me that working with attorneys is not difficult as long as you remain focused on the specifics of the matter at hand. Oh, how wonderful. Okay, so my rent is over $2,200 a month, which is extremely high for my area, and I live in a military installation. A townhouse and 1 parking space are included in this expensive price. The townhouse is fine. The problem is finding a parking space. My neighbor had just gotten divorced, detested being in the military, and had given up on things like, everything. Because it was directly in front of his house, he just started parking in the spot I had reserved. After asking him to move it 100 times in a polite manner, he would get irritated and move his car. Then all of his roommate friends moved in with the piece of S, and they also don't give a D. Again, more cars are parking in my spot now. As I was pulling in, one of his friends actually parked in my spot. He told me, "I'm only going to be 20 minutes. But I don't care. It's my spot, a-hole. I told him to move. That's it. I can no longer bear to wait. My wonderful wife helped me to relax by clarifying that it was only a parking space. Later that night, I leave to go somewhere I can't remember, and when I return home, someone else has taken my place. He tells me he doesn't know whose car it is after I knock on his door and ask someone to move the car. Given that it was a new car, I trusted him. When I return home the following day, the disgusting car is still there. Someone has entered it straight out of the dude's house. The person deceived my face. After phoning my wife right away, who was unable to soothe me, I called housing, who informed me that they were unable to tow cars because they were on base. I then become a big D. After a day, he and his awakened companions are occupying my parking space. I pull in like a bat out of H, so I don't care. None of them get hit by me. Okay, is my response when they call me an a-hole. I've never hated someone so much that I want to break my lease on him and go through it to see if he's breaking any of the terms. It was obvious that he was subleasing to his friend, which is a serious transgression. When I call housing, they say they'll look into it as soon as they can, but I tell them to do it right away. I assert that despite my repeated calls, the neighbor has not responded to my concerns for months, and they now say they will. I said I'd wait, not willing to accept no for an answer. When they descend, I stand there waiting. I didn't stay long, but I received a call informing me to contact security if the owner of that house parked in my spot once more. They would ensure that the car was removed, or they would. A U-Haul is parked in my spot a week later. Move it, I tell him. He claims he wasn't subleasing and that he's being removed for ridiculous reasons. I tell him to move the U-Haul, I don't care. They had to move everything out of the house and down the street because there's no other parking spaces available. It doesn't concern me. I'd heard he was trash-talking me on Facebook. Feeling different. I'm the one who got him kicked out of the base housing. Don't park in my spot, mother effer. F you. I was making the transition from paying my HOA with a check to using an automated clearinghouse, ACH. Some sort of error occurred within the system, and as a result, my payment did not arrive until the following month. Due to the fact that this occurred, I was charged a late fee of $25. Bear in mind that we're currently in April of the year 2020 in the midst of a worldwide chaos where foreclosures have been halted and everyone's financial situation is uncertain. After I was made aware of this late fee assessment, I made the decision to give the HOA a call and make an effort to explain what had transpired. Despite the fact that I was paying my monthly dues, I did not want to give them an additional dollar. I put off calling them, which turned out to be my biggest mistake. Following this initial fee, I was then charged a $50 late fee on a monthly basis throughout the duration of the pandemic. Following a period of several months, I finally made the decision to call the HOA company and speak with the manager. He told me that he would do me a solid in return by removing my balance if I helped him open the door for a contractor to enter our building. He needed my assistance. A month later, elections were held for the board of directors. I applied for the position of treasurer. I entered the building just as the manager of the association was distributing ballots to the members. Due to my outstanding balance, he informs me that I'm unable to vote and that I'm also unable to run for treasurer. In addition to that, he had the audacity to tell me that he had never spoke to me in his entire life. This election was such a disaster that it should be discussed in its own post. Attempts to call the police, charges of assault, and general chaos. A few more months have passed and my equilibrium is gradually improving. It received a discount of up to $500 off the initial late fee of $25. My homeowners association was charging me a higher amount of interest and penalties than a credit card company would. After that, I received a letter from the county in the mail informing me that a lien's been placed on my property. I'm of the opinion that this occurred in spite of the election results, which were generally favorable to me. The Homeowners Association did not respond to my phone calls to the attorney who was offering a settlement. Consequently, I made a phone call to the president of the board, and I received a letter that cleared my balance with the association. I was able to clear my lien, and I even forced the attorney who was collecting to pay all of my legal fees. If you want to watch the part 5, click the link here. I'm very, very glad to see you all in the comments again, and many thanks for your support.